Good evening, everyone. Time for episode 12 of The Last Admiral. Today is Monday, January 17th, 2022. We'll be taking up the story where we left off last time at the bottom of page 92. Some notable events on this day in history include: in 1924, surplus war material was sold to the Mexican government. For the first time, members of the House and Senate argued that selling of arms to foreign countries should be permanently illegal. Too bad they lost that argument. Okay. In 1949, the first Volkswagen Beetle arrived in the United States. In 1950, the famous Brinks robbery occurred in Boston. And in 1991, Operation Desert Storm began. And a lot of the politics of that era, the whole Iraq conflict era, I tried to echo the politics of that time in my stories. Some notable birthdays include Jake Paul, Betty White, Michelle Obama, Jim Carrey, and Muhammad Ali, all born on this day, January 17th. Okay, let's start off where we left off. Fu trying to escape from the terrible assassin. Okay. Abandoning the tiller, Cam drew his fishing knife and rushed at their enemy. In his haste, he slipped amid the flapping fish and fell beneath the stranger's feet. Trying to rise, he received a violent strike across the back of his neck. Fu saw him fall dead without uttering a sound. He knew that he did not stand a chance against a man such as this. Trying to tread water, Han was screaming in agony and drifting further and further away. The stranger was staring right at him as he pulled a small metallic object out of the fabric of his jacket. The deepest ocean suddenly seemed vastly safer than staying on board with the demon that he now faced. The man drew his hand back to throw something at him, but he needed no more encouragement. Something stung his leg as he dove into the sea and swam for his life. Reaching Han, he saw that his face was bloated and ghastly looking. His eyes bulged hideously, and his breath came only in ragged gasps. Fu reached around his chest in order to help him to tread water, but Han's body only shuddered and went still. He was gone, killed in seconds by a demonic man that none of them had ever met. To Fu's greater horror, their boat was again coming under sail and rapidly moving away. It seemed that the villain was no stranger to sailing. Fu felt a painful burning sensation in his right leg. Reaching down, he pulled a 5-inch-long needle out of his calf. Sharp, metallic, and pointed on both ends, it looked like a miniature javelin with discolored points. His pain magnified with the realization that he was poisoned. He looked at his leg underwater. His lower leg was swelling and turning purple. He was lucky in a way, because the bleeding had stopped, and these waters were full of deadly sharks. The waves began to crest higher, pushed by the winds of the coming sunset. With each rise and fall of the waves, he could glimpse Shang Tsung, now only a distant speck of an island. The water was not too cold, but his homeland was a seemingly impossible distance to swim, and there were things in the deep waters beneath him, beasts far more terrible than sharks that might come for him. Choking down his fear, he bid his friends farewell and began to swim. There were no boats or spots of land anywhere nearby. Shang Tsung was a naval launching point for Dragonia's warships, and most of the locals of working age had been shanghaied. They spared Fu and his friends, just as long as they sold their bountiful catch to the Navy first, and the local inhabitants second. He was a great swimmer, but he had never attempted to go so far, and the numbness in his leg was climbing higher with every stroke. His family was native to Shang Sun, farmers, anglers, and warriors since ancient times, proud freemen until the hated Dragon Queen had forced them to submit at the point of a sword. They were not quitters, though, and he was not about to give up. He was the only living witness to what... The footnote is just the meaning of Shanghai. The demon had done, and he was intent on seeking justice. If only he could survive. He swam on until the sun began to set. Shang Sun seemed a little closer when a tall fin creased the waves before him. He knew its shape well, the dreaded tiger shark, a notorious man-eater. 4 of him, standing end to end, could not have spanned the beast's body. He felt the poison in his leg coursing through him. Viewing the world through a tiny closing window of light, his consciousness drifted away. Queen and country. The Mei Nang had lived up to its name for its new captain, but had failed its former owners in every way. Zhao had sailed small boats like this one for many years. The gaff-headed sloop was an older design, simple but awkward to handle. It sailed well enough, though, and he intended to sail it all the way home to Farad Hoth. It would be a long journey, and well worth the reward. Fiddler had survived. Wet and very cold, he freed himself from his waterlogged web, and then shook himself until all his little hairy legs were dry. Not happy, not happy, he rasped. Sorry, Fiddler, Zhao said. I did my best. Turning to face his master in the fish-laden deck, he stared back angrily in the stark, cold way that only an arachnid could. Fiddler, hungry, he twittered. If Zhao hadn't been so familiar with his pet, he might have wondered what exactly Fiddler was thinking about at that moment. Luckily for the assassin, the Guer Arakul didn't feed on humanoids at all, much preferring small rodent fare above all else. Try some fish. After a few curious moments, hunger overcame the spider, and Fiddler discovered that mackerel was not so bad after all. Sailing toward the nearest large island, Zhao intended to go ashore in order to buy supplies and then set sail again for the north. He believed that the island was their former port of departure, Shang Sun. It would be easy for him to blend in with the other sailors there and make a few discreet purchases for what he needed. The sunset was beautiful. The rain clouds had passed, and the sky was almost cloudless. In the distance, a small speck drew closer. It was a bird. No, a great bird. A horned owl of unusual size. Swooping downward, it flared, landing gently upon the gunwale of the boat, hopping onto the deck, and transformed into the queen. Zhao tried to maintain control of the sailboat, but he felt compelled to kneel. My lady, he greeted. The queen rose to her full height, ancient beyond measure, but commanding in her power. You have done well, Zhao Conrun, but the goddess is uncertain of your success. Zhao had encountered the queen before in many places and in many guises. He knew he had her favor, but he knew his place as well. I felt his body, both cold and lifeless myself, my queen. Yes, the goddess saw him slide down into the sea. But there is a place aboard that ship where her eyes cannot look. We fear some Lucheron trick. No one in this world could have survived Fiddler's bite without the antidote already in the system. Aklon is no more. Standing with her hands on her hips, she said, We shall see, Master Assassin, but now you have new orders. Sail on to Shang Sun and seek out Vlad, Aklon's son. Soon he will travel to the academy. The prophecy is fated as long as one of the Lucheron blood still exists. Wait for him on the road to his precious academy, and then kill him and his step-brother with him. Only then can we be together forever. It shall be done, my queen. For now, lower the sail, and be with your queen. She was old, the oldest dark elf that had ever been. Indeed, she was the first, created by the goddess at the dawn of time, and she had all the gifts of immortality. With a thought, she could transform herself into the body of her youth, glorious, beautiful beyond measure, strong and willful. Zhao knew her well, as they had been secret lovers for many years. Drifting with the current's whim, they retired to the boat's tiny cabin, and Zhao received his reward. The night was theirs. At dawn, the queen reminded him of his duty, kissed him goodbye, transformed herself, and then took to wing. Overnight, the fish had begun to spoil, so he shoveled them overboard. Hoisting sail, he set his course for Shang-Tsung. I shall kill the son of a clon. Fu awoke. Somehow, he was still alive, floating about on his back and staring up at the morning sky. His leg no longer hurt so much, and something was underneath his back, supporting him. Reaching back, he felt the tough smoothness of shark skin, and it seemed to go on forever. Lurching with sudden fright, he nearly toppled back into the sea around him. The creature beneath him slowly sank away, only to come up again a scant few yards away. The shark was not alone. Dozens of fish of similar size swam around him in an ever-shrinking circle. He was helpless. Resigned to his fate in treading water, he awaited the inevitable. The shark that had supported him stood out from the rest in length and breadth, over 18 feet from nose tip to tail fin, and massively constructed. Its jaws could have easily swallowed him whole. Turning about, it swam directly toward him. Fu thought about his small fishing knife, and realized how ridiculous it was in the face of such might. The urge to fight and survive had returned to him somewhat, but the shark just floated there, beyond his reach. "What are you waiting for?" Fu shouted, looking at the vehicle of his ultimate destruction. Fu started to feel that the shark was laughing at him. "Ah," Fu observed, "so I am hardly a mouthful then." And then he laughed, that a way that a man does when he has begun his descent from the peak of Everest and come to the end of his rope, with still thousands of feet beneath him. Splashing about in his helplessness, he realized his own exhaustion. His spirit was prepared to do battle, but his body stood by death's vaulted door. Pushing himself under, he stared at the beast eye to eye. His fear had become so great that it was as a living thing within him. Releasing it required a depth of courage that he had never realized before that moment. It passed out of him like a wave, leaving him empty and calm, like the summer sea at sunset. Circling around him were dozens of staring giant sharks, like the one before him. The largest swam closer, its mouth closed. When the shark turned, its side pressed against him. Its incredible dorsal fin was within reach. It seemed to be offering him a ride. With no other recourse left to him, and no more air, he grasped it, and the shark began to swim, rising higher so that his head could escape the sea. With effortless grace, it carried him forward towards the shores of Shang-Tsung. They swam for hours until they entered the shallows along the eastern shore, and it could swim no further. Fu slid off its back and onto the sand, still chest deep in the ocean. Before his eyes, the shark transformed into a giant, with armor made of seashells and a crown of blue coral. "Little fisherman," his voice boomed, I have saved you, and for that you owe me a debt of blood." Fu was out of his depth. All that he could manage was a nod. "You are a noble angler," the giant praised. "You take only what you need from the sea, and never waste your catch. You may call the mariners of Poseidon your friends." "Yes, sir," Fu muttered. "Listen to me well, little Fu. There is a mansion near the center of the island, the estate of Acklon Lusharon. Do you know of it?" "I do, my lord." "You must travel there with all the speed that you can muster. Once there, you must deliver a message to Acklon's son Vlad, and he alone. Vlad alone. Do you understand?" "I do, sir," Fu replied. "Tell him that when he leaves for the academy, he must take the road less traveled. If he goes by the main road, then he will surely die. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Fu answered. The giant made him repeat the message 3 times to make certain that he understood it, and then he gave him a parting gift. Touching Fu on the shoulder, he gave him a small portion of his power. "Until the deed is done, you will have the strength and stamina of a giant. Do not stop until your promise is fulfilled, or my power will destroy you." "Yes, sir," Fu affirmed. "Farewell, brave one. Perhaps one day we will meet again." Then the giant turned and strode back into the deep. Transforming once again into a tiger shark, he slowly disappeared from view. Moments earlier, Fu had been poisoned, cold, and exhausted nearly unto death. Now he was no longer tired, and his leg wound was healed. He felt like a god. Striding out of the sea and onto the pearl-white beaches of Shang-Sun, he examined the high cliffs rising up 100 feet before him. He knew this part of the coastline well. A natural stairway climbed the stony face to the top close by. Striding toward it, he tested the strength of his body. Pacing hard across the beach, he slowly picked up speed until he was running faster and more effortlessly than any ordinary man ever could. His blood surged, his heart leaped. The power was intoxicating. His people knew that a debt of blood was binding in body, mind, and soul. It was the will of heaven. His family had lived on Lusharon lands for thousands of years, long before the present occupants owned them. Acklon and his family were Dragonians, Dok-Elfar, and foreigners, and yet, unlike any of those who ruled them, they held the title to his family's ancestral home, but had chosen only to protect it, allowing as much as was possible for Fu's people to live as they always had, that is, in the time before the Queen. Resigned to his fate, he would not stop until his debt of blood was paid. Reaching the top of the hill, he ran north along its edge, searching for a familiar path, and it was not long before he found it. Turning onto it, he ran for miles across the barren, a long expanse of stony plateau where few things could grow. It was a region where the displaced among his people had been forced to live after their homes had been taken from them in defeat. Many died during that first winter. Trying not to think about it, he pushed himself to the limit, and the ground passed quickly beneath him. Soon he would reach his home. And that's where we'll end the story tonight, at the bottom of page 99. We'll take up next time with page 100, the chapter entitled The Road Less Traveled. Thank you and have a good night. Hope you enjoyed it.